Have you ever produced a wall primer that looked absolutely perfect inside the bucket? Smooth, bright, the viscosity looked right. Everything seems ready for the market. Then a few days later, your customer called and said the paint is peeling, the wall still look patchy, the top coat isn't bonding properly. Or even worse, the primer failed. Immediately, many manufacturers blame the formula. Some blame the binder, others blame the supplier. Some even think they brought, or rather, they bought fake chemicals. But after teaching several paint manufacturers for many years, I have discovered something interesting. Most wall primer failure doesn't begin with the formula. They begin much earlier inside the production process. In today's video, we are going inside the factory to uncover 5 production mistakes that quietly reduce wall primer quality. You will discover why preparing water correctly matters, why mixing order changes everything, why improper thickening, hydration create unstable badges, why filler balance affect both cost and performances, and why understanding the binder is one of the most important skills every paint manufacturer should develop. More importantly, you will begin thinking like a professional paint factory instead of following different formulation blindly. By the end of this lesson, you won't just remember 5 production mistake made in wall primer paint. You will understand why they happen. And once you understand the production system behind a wall primer, you will make better decisions, solve problem faster, produce more constant product, and build great confidence every time you manufacture paint. Because understanding always lasts longer than memorization. If this is your first time watching one of our video, you are welcome. This lesson is part of our wall primer product mastering series where each episode builds on the last. If you would like the complete learning journey, you will find the full playlist and previous episode link in the description below. I recommend watching the series from the beginning because each lesson builds the foundation for the next. Now, let's continue. Welcome back to Glina Paint Education. If you're interested in paint manufacturing, paint production system, paint formulation, paint chemistry, or building a profitable paint manufacturing production business, you are in the right place. Here, we don't just mix chemicals, we solve problem, we build system, we think like a factory. Not long ago, one of my students called me after producing a batch of wall primer. He sounded disappointed. He told me, Coach Glina, everything looked perfect while I was producing this wall primer. The color was good, the consistency looked right. But after my customer applied it on the wall primer paint started failing. His first question was exactly what many paint manufacturers ask. Is my formula wrong? Instead of asking about the formula, I asked him something different. Tell me exactly how your production was. How did you produce your wall primer paint. As we went through every production step, we discovered that the formulation wasn't the problem. The production system was. One small mistake made during production affected everything that happened afterwards. That single lesson reminded me that professional paint factory don't succeed because they have secret formula. They succeed because they understand the system behind the formula. This is where many paint manufacturers get stuck. When a batch fails, they immediately change the formulation. They increase the binder, reduce the fillers, buy different chemicals, or copy another paint manufacturer's formula. But the same problem keep returning. Why? The reason is simple. Because the formula wasn't the real problem. Imagine giving two professional chefs exactly the same ingredient. Will they prepare exactly the same meal? Probably not. The differences isn't the ingredient. The differences is the process. Paint manufacturing works exactly the same way. Professional paint factory don't just control what goes into the mixer. They control how, when, and why it goes into the mixer. Over the next few minutes, we will investigate the 5 production mistakes that quietly reduce wall primer quality. We'll also discover why poor water preparation weakens the entire production system, why the wrong mixing order creates hidden problem, why the thickener hydration is about more than viscosity, why the filler balance are affecting heating power and durability, and why the binder can never compensate for poor production particles. Each mistake may seem smaller, but together they determine whether your customer receive a professional coating. Before we continue, I would like to hear from you. Have you ever produced a wall primer paint that looked perfect in the bucket but failed after application? What happened? Was it peeling? Was it poor adhesion? It wasn't covering very well. The top coat wasn't bonding, or it simply did not look like a wall primer paint. It wasn't doing its job. Or the wall primer paint settled in the bucket. It was spoiled before application. It had foam, or maybe something completely different. Share your experience in the comment. Your answer might help another paint manufacturer avoid the same mistake. Now, let's begin with the production mistake number one. So, mistake number one is poor water preparation. You see, this is probably the most underestimated step in wall primer paint production or even when producing other paints. The reason is because many paint manufacturers think water is simply something that fills the bucket. After all, it is usually the cheapest chemical in the formulation or ingredient. Now, some of these paint manufacturer, they just pour water inside the mixing tank, immediately begin adding the powder, chemicals, or the fillers, and they start mixing and expect professional results without even understanding the type of water they're about to use in their production. Maybe the water needs treatment, maybe the water isn't just as clean as it looks. And this water also determines the total finishing of the production process. Even if you go ahead and preserve your paint inside the bucket, what happens when it gets to the finishing process, which is the application process of this wall primer paint? And like I said, they just pour in the water into the mixing tank or mixing bucket, add other powder chemicals, and they expect a professional result. But professional factory never worked that way. They understand something very important. Water is not just any chemical or ingredient. It is the foundation of the entire production system. Every chemical you add afterwards depends on the condition of that water. Think about it. The dispenser must work inside the water. The deformer works inside the water. The preservative protects the water phase. The thickener hydrates inside the water. Even the pigment and the fillers depend on properly prepared water to dispense evenly. And of course, when you treat your water, you have a very good paint. Because if the foundation is unstable, every chemical that follows begins working under poor condition. And once it happens, the production system starts failing long before the customer even opens the bucket. This is why professional paint factory don't rush the first stage of production. They prepare the water. They allow each additive to perform its functions. Then they gradually build the formulation because factories understand one important principle: preparation prevents production problem. Let's compare two paint manufacturers. Manufacturer A wants to first finish production quickly. He fills the tank with water, add calcium carbonate, throw in titanium dioxide, add thickener, add binder, mix everything together. The primer looks acceptable, so he packaged it. A few weeks later, the customer starts to complain when using this primer on the wall. Now, let's look at paint manufacturer B. Before adding any powder, the water is conditional. It is treated. After that, the dispenser is added first, followed by other chemical. Only after preparing the foundation are pigment and fillers introduced gradually. The thickening is allowed to hydrate properly when it gets to the addition of its own process. Finally, the binder is added to lock all the chemicals together. Both paint manufacturer may use almost the same formulation, yet one produce customer complain, the other produce customer is satisfied. Imagine you are planting a tree. Would you place the tree on a dry concrete and expect it to grow? Of course not. You prepare the soil first, you water it, you make sure the environment is ready. Only then do you plant the tree. Paint manufacturing works exactly the same way. The water is the soil, the chemical are the seed. If the environment isn't prepared properly, the formulation cannot perform at its best. Or think about building a house. No engineer starts with the roof. Everything begins with the foundation. Professional paint factory think the same way. The strongest the foundation, the strongest the final product. Let's test your factory thinking. Imagine you have just produced a batch of wall primer paint. The next morning, you notice poor dispersion, foaming on top, uneven consistency, and small lumps. Before changing your formulation, what should you investigate first? A. Increase the binder. B. Buy a different thickener. Or C. Review how the water was prepared before production begins. Take a moment and think about your answer. If you choose C, you are beginning to think like a professional paint factory, because professional paint manufacturers investigate the production system before they change the formulation. I would like to learn from your experiences as well. When producing wall primer, do you prepare your water first, or do you add powder chemical immediately after the filling in the mixing tank? I know most paint manufacturers are listening to me. Have you ever traced a production problem back to poor water preparation, or maybe you're not aware? Or have you had any of these experiences? Share your experience in the comment. Your answer could help another paint manufacturer improve their production process worldwide. Every professional wall primer paint begins with a strong foundation, not because water is the most expensive chemical, but because every other chemical depends on it. When the foundation is prepared correctly, the formulation works with you instead of against you. But preparing the water is only the beginning. The next production mistake happens when paint manufacturers start adding chemicals. Now, in the wrong mixing order, and in that one mistake can affect every stage of the production process. All right, then, now that the foundation has been prepared correctly, let's move to production mistake number two: adding chemicals in the wrong mixing order. This is one of the most common mistake I see when visiting small or even large paint factories. Many people believe that as long as every chemical enters the mixing tank, the final product will be the same. But paint chemistry doesn't work like that. Every chemical is designed to perform a specific function at a specific time under specific condition. If you change that sequences, you simply change the chemistry. You see, professional paint factories don't simply ask, did we add all the chemical? They ask, did every chemical have the right opportunity to perform its job? Think about the dispensant. Its job is to separate pigment and fillers, grind it properly. If you add large amount of calcium carbonate before the dispersant has started working, the particles begin sticking together. The dispenser now has to work much harder. Sometimes it never completely separates them. The result is poor dispenser, low heating power, and reduced product performances. Now think about the binder. The binder job is to hold the finished paint flame together. But if you add the binder too early, before pigment and fillers are properly dispensed, the binder starts coating particles that haven't been separated. Instead of helping the system, it slows proper dispensant. The same formula now behaves differently, not because the chemical changed, but because the production sequences changed. Professional paint factory understand that every stage prepares the next stage. That is why they follow standard operating procedures, often called the SOPs, for every single batch, not because they enjoy rules, but because consistency depends on discipline. Let's compare two production operation. Operation A knows the formula. Operation B understand the system. Operation A is in a hurry. It fills the tank, adds chemical randomly, stop the mixing several times, rush hydration, package the batch. Everything looks fine until customer begins complaining. Operation B follows the production system. Every chemical is weighed accurately. Every stage is completed before moving to the next. The thickness hydrated fully. The binder is added at the correct stage. Quality checks are completed. Only then is the paint packaged. Months later, customer continue buying this product not because it has a secret formula, but because every batch performs consistently. That is what professional paint manufacturing looks like. Imagine baking bread. You have flour, water, yeast, salt, and sugar. The ingredients are correct, but suppose you ignore the process. You forget to activate the yeast. You don't nail the dough properly. You baked it before it has risen. Will the bread come out correctly? Probably not. The ingredient wasn't the problem. The process was. Paint manufacturing works exactly the same way. The right ingredient used in the wrong sequence can still produce the wrong result. Factories don't just control ingredients, they control the order in which those ingredients interact. Let's test your factory thinking again. Imagine two paint manufacturers use exactly the same wall primer formulation, the same binder, the same fillers, the same chemicals, but one primer performs much better than the other. What is the most likely reason? A. One factory bought more expensive chemical. B. One factory followed a better production system and mixing sequences. C. One factory used more water. Take a moment and think about your answer. If you select B, you are beginning to understand how professional paint factory thinks, because consistency doesn't begin with expensive chemicals. It begins with disciplined production system. I would like to hear from paint manufacturers around the world. Do you follow a written production sequences, or do you produce from memory? And have you ever discovered that changing the mixing order completely change the quality of your paint? Share your experiences in the comments. Someone in another country may learn from what you have experienced. Here are one lesson I hope you will remember long after these tutorials end. A beginner asks, what chemical should I add? A professional paint manufacturer asks, when should I add them? Why should I add them? And what happens if I don't add these chemicals? That single change in thinking transform the way a factory operates, because successful paint manufacturing isn't just about following a formula, it is about controlling a system. Every chemical prepares the next chemical. Every production step prepares the next production step. And every decision made inside the paint factory or paint production process eventually appears on the customer's wall. That is why professional paint factory don't leave quality to chance. They build system that produce quality batch after batch every single time. Now that you understand the importance of water preparation and mixing order, we are ready to explore the remaining production mistake that silently weaken wall primer paint quality and leads to expensive customers complaints. Production mistake number 3, incorrect thickener, which is your HEC or nitrosol hydration. Now that you understand the importance of water, preparation, and mixing order, let's continue with this incorrect thickening hydration. Like I said, many manufacturers believe that thicken simply makes paint thicker, but professional paint factory knows it does much than that. The thickener controls viscosity, suspension, application, and the overall stability of the product. When HEC or nitrosol is added too quickly or added into poorly prepared water, it forms lumps. Those lumps trap dry powder inside. No amount of additional mixing can completely hydrate those particles. The result is unstable viscosity. One batch becomes too thick, another becomes too thin. Customers begin noticing inconsistent application. Professional paint factory never rush thickening hydration. They give the chemical enough time to fully absorb water before continue producing, because a proper hydrated thickener creates a stable production system. Now, the fourth production mistake is using the wrong filler balance. Many new paint manufacturers believe adding more calcium carbonate automatically increase profits or makes the paint more thicker. After all, fillers are cheaper than titanium dioxide, so why not use more? Now, because fillers don't only reduce cost, they also influence hidden power, flame strength, coverage, adhesion, and durability. Too much filler can weaken the primer or your paint. Too little filler can make production unnecessary expensive. Professional paint factory don't simple ask, how much filler can we add? They ask, how much filler allows this product to perform exactly as it was designed to? That is factory thinking. The goal is balance, not maximum filler, not minimum filler, the correct filler balance. Finally, production mistake number 5, insufficient or incorrect acrylic binder. If fillers build the body, the binder builds the strength. The binder is the glue holding the entire coating system together. It binds pigment, it binds filler, and most importantly, it binds the primer to the wall. When too little binder is used, the coating becomes weak, the surface becomes chalky, adhesion decreases, durability fails. Eventually, the top coat loses its foundation. Customers describes it as peeling paint. But the peeling didn't begin with the top coat, it began inside the primer. Professional paint factory understands something very important. The binder should never be treated as an area to cut costs without understanding the consequences. Every reduction affects performances. The objective isn't using the most binder. The objective is using the right binder at the right level for the performances your product promise. I am Coach Glina. Thank you for learning with Glina Paint Education today. Before you go, I would like to hear from you. Which of these 5 production mistakes have you experienced in your paint factory, and what did you learn from it? Your experiences could help another paint manufacturer somewhere in the world produce a better badge tomorrow. I'll see you in the next video on how to start a wall primer production business.